Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a very interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Rike Tulay, which apparently is a model that's been around for a bit. I wasn't aware of it until very recently, but I've spent some time with it, and I was already really impressed with this thing right out of the box. It's at a very interesting price point, a price point where things are usually kind of boring. But this is much more interesting considering it is a G10 integral, meaning the entire frame is milled from one giant block of G10 versus, what we usually see. We see two pieces of material and, a couple of liners sometimes and, screws and things like that. No, it's one piece of G10, which is really neat. We normally see this in much more expensive knives when it's titanium, right? That's where you see the majority of integrals, and those tend to be dramatically more expensive, even when we're, looking at Chinese production knives, which this is. But if you're familiar with Rike, you know that they always do an excellent job. They always go above and beyond, and this knife is no exception. I actually think it is one of the most interesting knives ever at this price point. I'm going to tell you exactly what I think here. So I'm going to link this knife down in the description so that you can check it out. It comes in a few different configurations. The one you're seeing here is, I believe, the most expensive with the carbon fiber inlays, but they do have different colors of G10 laid into the G10 frame, so you can check those out if you want to. It does help my channel when you use those links, but that's entirely up to you. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. Thanks to Rike for sending this in for review. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and, at least for the time being, on TikTok at _metal_complex. Let's go ahead and get through specs here really quick. The overall length of the Rike Tulay, or Tulay, I don't know how to pronounce it exactly. It's a full-size knife by my definition, about 8¼ inches. Blade length is coming in at, wow, really? Yeah, I'm going to give that 3.75. Cutting edge also 3.75. Really awesome ratios. It's not often we see that large of a blade on an 8¼ inch knife. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons. Any custom scales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and Others, up against the 8010 and the 8020.5. You can see what I mean here. I mean, it's not a small knife. It just ends up being compact in nature due to the size when it's closed and the weight of the materials used. So nowhere near as robust as something like the 8010. Let's put it up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. Really showing off those ratios here. Did I measure this correctly? I don't think I did. The overall length of the Tulay, I was so wrong. 8.75 inches, that's why. I was like, man, there's no way. 3.75 inch blade, I'm sure you guys were all screaming at me. You idiot! No, yeah, I'm sorry. This is a much larger knife than I actually said. It's about 8.65 to 8.7 inches, but still a very impressive 3.75 inch blade. So it comes in much larger overall, right? But the amount of handle space is almost identical to the PM2, not making nearly as much use of this area up here, but the total amount of cutting edge is ridiculous compared to something like the PM2, which is, it's a different idea with the design. Much larger, obviously, than the Para 3. Stupid guy doesn't know how to use a tape measure. All right, up against the Benjamin Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. How's the action on this knife? It's good. It feels a little tight, but as you can see here, it doesn't take much encouragement to get the blade to fall. Really, the highlight is in the flipping action itself. The shape of this flipper tab and the detent strength, which feels heavier than it actually is. And I think that's just because the pivot is tight. The first time I flipped this, I was like, wow, that's kind of a heavy detent. I think it's the detent ball. The detent itself is not so prominent. I think we have some heavy lock bar tension. And then we also just have really good leverage off of that flipper tab. So the flip feels super satisfying. But when you bring the blade down here, it feels about medium, honestly. So yeah, I think that it doesn't feel gritty. It doesn't feel like it's low quality. It just feels like general tightness, which I believe will smooth up over time. But overall, I think the action is very good. There's only one means of deployment, and that's a flipper tab. I was about to say, and it works perfectly, and then I missed twice, but it does work really well. As long as you get that, it's much more of a light switch in my opinion, than it is a push button, but you absolutely can push button it. I just really like the position, the angle, and I like that there's a hole in the flipper toe. Rike knives always look so stylish. And I swear when they design these things, they're like, oh, what about this space? There's nothing going on here. Let's do something there. Let's make something. And the decision they make for the most part is always very flowy, right? We'll get back to that. But action good, right? To reduce that to how a caveman would review this knife. Action good. Make feel good. Good action, right? If that's all you're looking for, I get it, right? Action's good. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's actually, I didn't expect that. It just doesn't feel like a thick. I think it's just maybe it's contoured. It definitely is contoured. Or at least we have so many different bevels that it gives off the impression of contouring. But I believe right at the top you can see it is slightly contoured. But I think maybe just to create the ergonomic experience that they were aiming for, maybe the scales are a little bit thicker. It certainly does not feel like a thick knife. In fact, to be honest with you, because of the blocky nature of the scales on the Para 3, the Para 3 actually feels more clunky. This feels more natural. So despite being thicker, you're in for a good ergonomic experience, which again we'll come back to. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. This knife carries like a knife that is so much smaller, which is why I think I just blindly accepted the 8 1/4 inch measurement. A lot of people ask me, if you've been carrying and using the knife and you've prepared for a review, how did you not know how long the knife was? I'll tell you, I do that on purpose. I don't measure things because, like before I start carrying them, I only measure them like when I'm in the review because I don't want my own personal bias to get in the way of my experience with the knife, which is definitely the most important thing. So I have a general preference when it comes to blade length and handle length and all of that, but those preferences are very often blown apart by knives that I didn't realize I would like so much. So I don't want to have this idea going into my care experience that I'm going to absolutely love it or absolutely not love it based on measurements. I just carry it and use it and then measure it in the review. And you guys are probably like, great, literally nobody asked. Well, you're getting the information anyway. Let's go ahead and move on here. Height-wise, it's really not tall. Overall, just honestly a very slender profile despite the scales being somewhat thick. It's just, I guess, integral nature, making room for the inlays. I don't know. So my care experience with this is even, it feels lighter and more compact than even something like the PM2. You can see there, I mean, this knife maybe slightly longer. It would mostly fit inside the lines of the PM2. So yeah, I really enjoyed carrying this. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'll get out my tools. As per usual, my tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. What's the benefit of an integral? Well, mostly the benefit is ease of disassembly. Integrals don't need body screws because the body is all one piece. So the only screws for this knife are the screws for the liner, which is, it's kind of a bummer that they had to do this, right? But the screws go through in this case, the carbon fiber and the G10 and into the nested steel liner, but I can kind of understand how they arrive there. And then you got screws for the pocket clip and you have screws for the pivot, and that's it. In fact, doing any sort of pivot maintenance, right, if you really want to get in there and clean, which most of the time you don't really have to, it's literally just the pivot. That's the only thing you have to take out and you're good to go. There is no reason to, I mean, you can switch out the pocket clip, right? You can do that if you want to. But there is no reason really to, take out the lock bar screws if you don't want to do that. So easy to get inside the pivot, easy to take apart if you have to, easy to adjust, T8 heads, really great. I like the cool factor of an integral. I like how integrals look, right? But I really love that they are just so simple to maintain. It's just awesome. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. Let's go ahead and measure the blade stock thickness here real quick. I don't think it's an overly thick blade. Blade stock thickness is coming in at 111 thousandths, definitely on the thinner side. Weight, this is G10 and carbon fiber. The G10 and G10 versions will be slightly different, more or less. I'm not really sure. The weight here is 3.53 ounces on an integral knife with a 3.75 inch blade, and your balance is right behind the pivot, exactly where you want it. This is beautiful. It's beautiful. Really like it. Okay, let's get into the meat and potatoes here. This is such an awesome looking knife. I just love the lines on this thing, and it looks angular. It looks like it wouldn't be comfortable, but it is. There's a little bit this rounded area in the flipper tab. It's got a little bit of jimping on there, not super aggressive, but you might notice it if you're really up into it. There's a small area that you could force a choke up position, but you really need to be careful there. This area back here, the sides kind of offer a little bit of traction for your thumb, especially as you push into it. The meat of your thumb will sort of pour over the sides. It sounds really gross. The meat of your thumb will pour over the sides. But it will do that, and you can get traction this way. As the meatier your thumbs, the better. There's plenty of jimping back here on the spine. Normally, I'm not a big fan of like blasted blades, but the blasting of the blade and honestly what I assume, I could be wrong about this, but this, it's like an enlarged pivot collar, and really what they've done here, because these are like, it's like pivot access zones because this is an integral knife. So if you think like how they got everything in there, these access zones are responsible for it, but they got creative with that. And they made these big plates that sort of go with the angular nature of the design, and they nested them in as inlays. That's cool. Sometimes these integral designs, they choose to hide them, and other times they choose to make them accents. And I think making them accents is a really good idea. In this case, it worked out beautifully. You get the contrast, titanium, and then the blue pivot collar, the pivot itself, which is really great. And then it looks great with the black background, the carbon fiber, and the blasted blade. These inlays, these metal inserts, are non-magnetic. And in the world of knives, I know in the world of like things that are magnetic and non-magnetic, and could be a bunch of different things, but in the world of knives, it's either aluminum or titanium. I think it's titanium. It is just dark enough. It has that kind of, when they tumbled it, it gives off that aesthetic of titanium, but I honestly don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if it's titanium. It also wouldn't surprise me if it's aluminum, but I like to think it's titanium. They don't actually specify, and I don't have any way of noticing or knowing, right? Even if I were to take them out, it's such a small piece, I'm not sure that I would know. But you can tell me what you think. Either way, I think it looks really, really great. So what's going on back here? Before we get moving on, I know people are going to want to ask, is the pocket clip reversible? I saved this for because I'm right-handed. I carry it in my right pocket, tip up, like you're supposed to. Tip down. Tip down, people like signing a petition to have me removed from YouTube. I am not sure if this is a reversible clip. My initial, when I unboxed this, I said, I don't think it's going to be, and I'll tell you why. I think this is just housing for the other side. You can see here that there's a little nesting zone in the G10, and this is to allow for the pocket clip to slip in and nest. Now, this area is also nested, but that nesting zone doesn't go all the way out to the butt of the knife. So I think this is literally just here to allow for the screws to go all the way through. And I think I'm right. But a bunch of you thought that I was wrong, so we're going to find out. All right? So let's get these all the way out and take a look real quick. You also, of course, have the option, people like to point out, you have the option to remove the pocket clip completely and let this thing flail around in your pocket like a Magikarp. I don't know why people decide to do that, but if you like to do that, if you like to sit down and have this knife turn horizontally and poke awkwardly into your leg, well, you have that option. That is certainly a thing that you can do. Yeah, again, guys, that just looks like a plate. Let's see here if I know that I have tools for this. Let's get some watch tools and see if we can poke that plate out. Is that not long enough? I don't think it is, darn it. But again, I really, truly believe that is just an access, or not an access plate, but it's like a way for the fasteners to just sort of attach. Here's something that we can use maybe. Wonder if that will fit through those holes. No, it won't. this piece is probably not meant to come out. And you can see here on this side, this goes all the way up. It's flat right there, right? On this side, it's just a small cylinder. So I don't even think that the back of this pocket clip can fit right here. So yeah, I'm right. I'm right about this. Everybody who said this was reversible, you're wrong. This part of the pocket clip won't even nest right here. This is just an attachment plate. So there we go. We are officially done with that part and we can all move on. Left-handed people, I feel for you. Look at these screws. These are so weird. I feel for you. I really wish that they had just, I mean, if you're going to do that, if you're going to make like this attachment plate, it's like a threaded plate so that these can, go through. Why not just make it, just go ahead and make it a filler tab? That's so weird. Like it's like they were like, this will make lefties super mad if we don't do, like, why would you do that? You're already creating what so many people call an eyesore with this plate. Why wouldn't you just go ahead and make it, a filler tab so that you could, I mean, the pocket clip is symmetrical, or it's very near, yeah, it's symmetrical, right? So yeah, that was a weird move by Rike. I don't know what aesthetic they were trying to save by not, man, that really does, like the nice thing about doing it like this is that a number of threads, like that pocket clip is not coming out of there. But really, they should have made it, something for lefties. But anyways, that's really the most annoying part. What do we have for the blade steel on this guy? We have 154 cm, which is one of my favorite steels ever. Right? It performs very similarly to VG10. For some reason, somewhere down the road, I got this idea in my mind that 154 cm was just a more premium steel. I don't know why, but it's very similar to VG10, but I like 154 cm, so I guess I like VG10 as well. I understand there are some differences, but I think 154 cm and VG10 are steels that are periodically acceptable over $100, and this is one of those cases, right? What we have here, the $100 to $150 territory in the knife world is such a hard territory for knife companies to really nail down because so many people have so many different expectations as far as what steels belong there, what materials, right? And it obviously is much more complicated than that. If you are new to knives or you're not new to knives and your entire value system is based on the materials used in the knife, your system is too basic and you need to expand your mind. It's not my opinion. This is factually true. There are too many variables that go into pricing. Now, as far as preferences go, obviously everybody has their own preferences and that's perfectly fine. But if your system of value is entirely based on the materials and not how these materials are executed and where they are executed, then your system is too basic. Expand it. This metal complex guy sure is pushy with his opinions. Shut up. So the Rike Tulay has, oh God, that's so bad. Everybody's going to be mad at me. This overall build, and the way that it's put together, right? G10 integral, nowhere near as expensive to do as a titanium integral, but still more expensive to do than 2 pieces of G10 and 2 pieces of steel screwed together with some standoffs, right? It still is more involved with that. On top of that, we have nested carbon fiber. Carbon fiber by itself is not an exotic material, despite what knife companies would have you believe. It's not. There's definitely higher and lower quality versions of it, but the material itself is not exotic. But creating a G10 integral frame and then nesting additional pieces of carbon fiber or G10, depending on which versions of you get, along with either titanium and aluminum and a pivot collar, right? Doing all this. It's very involved. It's very processy. There's a lot of things. This is nowhere near as simple as slapping together materials to create the rat, right? The argument that people like to make is, well, they both are capable of essentially the same things. Yes, but what was involved in creating one is factually more expensive, right? Which for a lot of people is what makes it interesting. It doesn't really matter if the tool is any more or less capable than tools that cost less money. The idea, what makes it interesting, even though a lot of people say it's absolutely silly, right? Welcome to the knife enthusiast world. It's been this way for a long time, right? This isn't a new concept. what makes it interesting is the fact that they did it. They don't have to do it to make a functional tool, but they did it anyway because it's interesting. If the whole world was just Ontario Rat 2s and Buck 110s and Opinels, I don't think I'd want to live here, right? I think maybe I'd get into pens because that world would be much more interesting. But anyways, the fact that they did it is interesting, and it factually does cost more money. So this is one of those situations where I feel like the materials used combined with the processes, despite the fact that it's manufactured in China, actually really justify the price. Which I'll tell you right now, the base price of this is about $125. And the this version that you're looking at right here is like $150, $160 with a carbon fiber. Okay, you don't have to get the carbon fiber, but yeah, I'm not mad about that. People, I think, will point out, Kaiser made the Brat. That's a G10 integral. Yeah. What's the blade steel on that? It's either 154 cm or 14C29. I think it's 154 cm. I can't remember. That guy's only $90 or so. Right. Also made in China, but I think we can all agree it's just nowhere near as complicated of a knife. The Rike Tulay has a lot more effort in it, a lot more designing. There's way more stuff going on here. And each one of these would be more costly to create. Not much, but more costly. So we'll kind of circle back to that, but I'm not upset with the price tag. I would love to see the blade and these pivot plates to be different finishes. I would love for them both to have tumbled, slightly reflective finishes to really make them pop. But the bead blasted finish is fine. Ergonomically, I'm really impressed with this thing. There's a ton of blade, a nice utilitarian drop point blade that's nice and thin, nice swedge right here, very even, really nice cutting geometry. Not a laser beam, but good enough for whatever tasks you would normally throw at it. Rike does a good liner lock. I'm not super concerned with this thing disengaging as long as you use it like a knife and not like a pry bar or a hammer or a screwdriver, because it's a knife and it is not those things. There's plenty of tension on the lock bar. In fact, this is kind of a high tension lock bar like I was talking about earlier. And I'm not worried about it disengaging. And I think the geometry looks good. There's plenty of contact. The spine, this area back here, definitely cool. Lots of different bevels and areas. This is actually kind of slightly radius, a little bit of texturing here, and then this is all flat. Everything looks good. Nothing looks lazy or unfinished. Just really like it. There is no lanyard hole, but you can attach a lanyard to the top of this slot on the pocket clip if you really want to. Really, my biggest gripe with this knife is every part of it is so stylish. And I think just to save money, they gave it a very generic clip. And the extra slap in the face, really mostly to lefties, is the fact that the clip is symmetrical and definitely a style of pocket clip that should have ambidextrous mounting positions, but it doesn't, right? It also has a little bit of a Civivi bill, which really bothers me. Man, I wish that they had just sprung for a titanium clip. I really wish that they would have. And I wish it was mountable on both sides, and I wish it didn't have a bill, right? But the fact that everything else about this knife is so cool and the pocket clip just seems like an afterthought, it really highlights this. It really sticks out like a sore thumb. However, it does, admittedly carry just fine. The bill is high enough that it goes over the, thicker pocket seams. It carries deep. The pocket clip screws, the heads definitely should have been nested, but they're not, so you have to fight that a little bit. That's kind of a weird choice. The other thing that kind of sucks is you have to look at these screws right here because of how the liner is nested. When we do a titanium, integral, the lock is part of the frame. Obviously, we can't make a lock out of carbon fiber in G10, so they had to attach a steel lock to the carbon fiber and the G10. So the screws start out up here and they thread into the liner rather than the screws being underneath and threading into the G10 and carbon fiber, because that wouldn't make sense, right? It would just fall apart. So unfortunately we have to look at those. They really should have made those screws black. It's bizarre. On this side of the knife, I'm really drawn to the very out of place looking pocket clip and the screws. But this side of the knife looks beautiful, right? Access to that lock bar is plentiful. It's huge access there. I think they knew like this lock bar has got crazy tension on it, so we really need some access, right? The detent strength is fine. As far as lockout goes, this does run on bearings, by the way, so it will loosen up over time and get smooth. No blade play up, down, left to right. Absolutely no lock stick, no pivot lash. Very, very consistent, right? That's what we look for. Not necessarily tightness or false shuttiness. Is the pivot action consistent? Is it already wearing that smooth race into the, I guess in this case, it would be the steel surfaces up here that the bearings are riding on? And the answer is yes, right? And it'll continue to do that until it gets really smooth. A single drop of 10-weight nano oil can smooth this process up, or you can just let it break in. Either way, you're going to have to adjust the pivot periodically. No pivot lash either. I love this. I think this is an awesome knife. This, for people who watch my channel and they're like, yeah, like all the cool stuff is so expensive. Like, MC will talk about cheap knives and it's great. He's got all this variety, but there's all this like hyper cool stuff that is exclusive to higher price points. For people who are interested in those designy elements, because again, a lot of what you're paying for in this knife is not utility. It has a basic utilitarian form. Like it'll do what a knife is supposed to do, but you're paying a lot for the extra, the cool factor here, right? There's lots of people who love that stuff, but just, they're like, well, I'm not going to spend $300, $400, $500, $600, $700, $1,000 on a pocket knife. So I'm just going to stick with, the under 200 or the under 150 territory. For those people, this is your answer. You get a lot of these really, really cool elements. I mean, honestly, like this has a lot of the cool factor, a lot of the joy. I get joy from this knife for the same reason I get joy from knives that cost substantially more. It's just got that extra stuff. It's interesting. It's different. And, when you're not looking at it and oohing and awing over the unique elements, it works as a great pocket knife. I mean, it really is. And it's also super compact for how much blade you're getting. I love this. I wish I was aware of it a lot earlier. Rike, I want you guys to do a couple of things. Number one, I would love for you to change up the pivot plates and the blade and put a different finish on them, just something different, right? And I would also love for you to do a more unique pocket clip, ideally titanium. Make these screws black, and then make this pocket clip reversible. I would also love it if you made a premium version of this knife where it is a titanium integral. And maybe an M390 blade. I think that would be super cool. And I am very familiar with Rike integral knives. They are definitely capable of doing it. They have done it many times in the past, and they always execute. So I think that would be neat. I also think it would be a good idea to make a small one of these. And for people saying you're asking a lot of Rike, look at their library. They clearly are willing to expand and do crazy stuff and make things in high volume. They have the capacity to do that. So I think it'd be cool. As far as the way that this is a very recommendable knife. The base versions in G10, because you don't need carbon fiber, just get the color of G10 you like. The base versions in G10 are $125. It's well deserving of that price tag, even if it is substantially more than the Kaiser Brat. This is just a lot more stylish. There's a lot more going on. This is a really cool knife, highly recommendable. That's going to be it for today, guys. Again, this knife will be linked in the description. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex, and at least for the time being on TikTok at _metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.